All right, what I'd like to do is just go over a little bit of the material from both Chapter 15 and Chapter 16. There's only about 2 pages from Chapter 16 that I'm going to really concentrate on. All right, so Chapter 15 here is on how to work with fonts and printing. And the one I'm most concerned with is on page 532 and 533, how to use Google Fonts. All right. I've sent Tom an email and I've asked if I can give him a call tonight, because what I need is, for lack of better words, I mean, we need some real content on the homepage. If he decides he wants to take that About page with a picture of him and his dog on it, expand on that a little bit, make that his homepage, that's fine, if that's what he wants. But right now there's just junk out there, and I don't want there to be junk out there. The point is, too, I'm going to ask him if he'll go online and go out, and if you look up on the screen here, if I just type in Google Fonts, all right, there it is, fonts.google.com, and right now, I know the last time I checked, there were 854 different fonts. Now there's 900. So in other words, if you want to be able, we'll just grab the Roboto right here. All right, so if we want to be able to use the Roboto, we click the plus sign here, and it brings this thing up down here. All right, and there's really 2 things that you have to do in order to be able to use it. This is it. You have to take and add this link file right there. You have to add that into your style sheet, and that should really be above your own style sheet link. And then in your CSS, if you want to use that throughout, you just put that in the body. Does that make sense? I'm asking you, does that make sense? All right. So you can use as many of these fonts as you want. It's not that you only can use one font. Maybe you really like the Roboto and you want that for all your headings, and that's fine. Maybe for the form you want something else, and that's fine. So you can set that up any way you want. So again, just one last time, I just want to make sure. So if I come through here, I'll just grab a different one. So it's fonts.google.com. There are 900 different fonts. If I decide, I know he wouldn't want this, but let's say he wanted this Sherman man. You click the plus sign, it brings the thing down here. You click in the bar down here, you'll have to add that link, and then anywhere you want to use it, you'll have to add that font family. That's literally all that you have to do. Now, if you didn't think that my explanation was stellar, that's okay. All right? And if you didn't, again, if we go back and we look in here, they talk about embedding fonts in a web page. That stuff's all fine and dandy. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. But today, you're finding more and more people are using Google Fonts because of the fact that after a while, if all you use are the fonts that are available to you on your machine, in some ways, every site starts to kind of look alike. But if you've got 900 to choose from, you've got a lot of variety when you think about it. Now, some of those fonts would make no sense for you to use with certain websites. Like I said, it's a dog walking business, and the one I just showed you was more cursive. You probably would never want that. All right? But those are the ones that are available. So as it says, figure 15.2 in the book shows how you can use Google Web Fonts to import fonts into your web pages. I'm not going to sit and read to you. All right, but they go through all of the steps here, and they show you exactly what I just showed you. All right, there are other fonts as well as Google Fonts. What do I mean? Well, right after this, they talk about Adobe Edge web fonts. So there are other ones, but we're going to stick with the Google fonts. I will ask you on your test on Friday to go out and, based on what he wants, okay, I'm going to ask that you go out and you add those fonts and you use them the way that he wants them used. All right. The way I look at it, if you kind of look at it that, I don't know, it's a football game. We're almost at halftime. And what I mean is we're just about halfway through the course. Okay? No, not quite. We've got this week and next week, and then we are halfway through the course. All right? So this week, I'm not talking any more than 9 o'clock today. I'll guarantee you that. It'll probably be before that. So you'll have time today, all right? You'll have some time tomorrow. You'll have time on Thursday to work on this stuff, all right? Now, one thing, I have graded the test that I was able to grade. With a couple of you, I had some problems. I didn't receive something or whatever. But the rest of you, your test grade is in there. I do have the actual tests too. We still have one person taking the test, and we still have a couple people who have to turn me stuff in. As soon as all that stuff is done, I'll give you the test back so you can look at it. And I'm not going to lie to you, too. 2 or 3 people in this room got over 100 because you did at least some of the extra credit. All right? I was very pleased with the way that the test went. Okay? All right, so I'm not going to go over the Adobe Edge fonts. I'm just going to tell him about the Google font. Now, the other thing they talk about in this chapter is right now you probably don't realize this. But right now, for example, if you come in there, you've done this. I'm going to put something on the board here, and it's not a surprise to any of you. You've all done stuff like this. Link, rel equals style sheet. STY, style sheet. All right. href equals css/style.css. You've all done something like that. Everybody in here has. What you probably don't realize, because it defaults to that, is what you could have added onto here is media equals screen. If you don't put that in, it gets put there by default. And what that means is the style sheet that you are creating is being set up for people to look at on a computer, all right? Or a computer, or a phone, or a tablet, or whatever, all right? But what they talk about in the rest of the chapter here is you can also format a website, and instead of saying media equals screen, I'm not going to write it, but you can put in media equal print, all right, and have a version so if somebody wants to print out the website, they can do that. Now let's think about things that you would do if you were formatting CSS for print. Okay, you may decide that you want few, maybe none of the graphics to print. Does that make sense? If you've got a site that's filled with color graphics, especially intricate color graphics, all right, that's a good way to use up all the toner that's in a computer, is to be printing those out all the time. I'm not saying you don't do it, but that's something that you might want to consider. You may not care about fonts. You may just want everything to print out in some generic sans serif font, all right, and that's fine too. They talk about some rules in here, and notice, at media print. All right, so they run through that in here. No, I'm not going to put this on your, I'm not going to put this on your test, but it's still something that is worth you looking at and knowing about. All right. Again, the default is screen. When you provide separate style sheets for screen and print, you usually code the link element for the print style sheet last. That way the print just needs to override whatever it needs to override from the other one. All right? Sometimes it very well might be very little. But what a lot of people do for their print version is it's just the text that prints from the website, and it's in a very generic font. Right? They give you some recommendations in here. I'm not going to read these, but just take a look at them. Some of them should just make sense. If you were doing anything with colors, you want to change it to black and white. All right, you got to realize that many people who, there's a good chance that many people who may decide to print this out don't have a color printer. And if you've got if you're printing out stuff that's got a lot of color in it, it may be different shades of gray or whatever, and it may be hard to read. All right, some of the rest of this, again, notice, keep the line length. Well, that's an issue when you think about it, because even though I asked you to and I didn't do it, so I couldn't take off for you not doing it, But this, when you do the test Friday, I'm going to ask that you put a little bit of margin on each end of every page. All right? Why? So when you print it out, none of it gets hacked off. You don't want that. All right? I mean, take a look at sites that are out there, and typically you're going to see that they're not butted up against the end like that. Again, remove as many images as possible. Remove site navigation. It doesn't make any sense for the printed page. All you have to do is, for that site navigation, is just say display none. If you don't want the nav bar, for the nav bar, display none. Boom, it's gone. All right. So they give you a 2-column web page with printing format, and they say this is a web page with 2 columns. And then they try to show you what it looks like printed. Now they have decided to put the image in there, but there's so many different ways that you can do this. And again, you might say, well, is this even an issue? Who gives it? You know what? And it just depends. But if you're creating a site for someone and they're paying you for it, all right, they may or they may not ask you to come up with a print version. Now, if they don't, is it your responsibility to ask? No, that's something that you have to decide on. Because if you've contracted with them for a certain amount of money to do certain things, and you ask them, oh, would you like this too? What are they going to say? Yeah. And now you're doing it for free, whether you realize it or not. It's like if I say, okay, and I do this. I mean, I come in here every morning, and I'm usually here at 5 after 5, and I usually leave at 4:30. Do the math. I'm here approximately 11 and a half hours every day. And you do the math, that's 57 and a half hours. I get paid for 37 and a half hours per week. All right? My wife says I am an idiot. She's like, you're putting in 20 hours extra a week. Yeah, but I'm doing that because if I didn't, I'd be doing it at home. And she's at the point where I don't want you working at home anymore. So that's why I do it like this. But those are decisions you have to make. And as a designer, you may be asked, or you may not be by the person that you're doing a site for. You had a question.
So if you remove the picture, does the alt tag appear at all?
Nothing should appear. No, you just literally you end up doing a lot of display nones. And when you set that up as display none, literally nothing related to it appears. Then they show you the associated CSS. Now, I'm telling you this, I mentioned this before, I want you to develop good habits. All right, that's one thing I want you to get out of this class. Please, and for those of you who did not do it, your media queries should come on the bottom of the page. Don't put them at the top of the page. It's just considered standard to put them at the bottom. All right? Some of you went and broke this up, and you had 2 or 3 CSS files. It's okay if you do that. All right. However, it's easiest for you to understand that. All right. And it's funny. I just wanted to show you this. I'm working on this thing. Do I still have it open? Probably not. I'm working on this thing for. I mentioned the other day about Parkway High School, Parkway South High School. And I went out to their website, all right, which is fine. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it. They've got pictures. They've got kind of what you'd expect, okay? But then I did a right mouse click, and I did a view page source. You think they got a couple of CSS sheets in here? All right? And you oftentimes find the more, what does that mean? It's possible they had different people developing each one of those pages, and they set up their stuff. I don't know. Is there a lot of duplication? You would kind of think there would be, but who knows? All right. All I'm saying is when you look at this, and you start working your way through here, I mean, I'm looking through, they put all their JavaScript is in here, rather than having it be in its own file or files. I was always taught to do it that way. I'm not saying what they did is wrong or bad. It's the way they did it. All right. But you may go to work for a company that says you're doing it this way, and you're not going to be asked. It's just expected you're going to do it that way. If you hang your own shingle out, then it's up to you as far as how you do it. But you should always do it in whatever way makes the most sense to you. All right? And that's it for that chapter. Like I said, there's not much to that. Now, chapter 16 is on CSS transitions, transforms, animations, and filters. All right, I don't know whether or not when I do stuff like I'm about to do, I may embarrass somebody. I never try to do that. But Lauren, I would like to compliment you. You are the only one in the class who took the pictures on the last test and actually turned them around so they were showing the right way. So they weren't like this. She made them like this. All right. And when you think about it, I mean, it just would make sense to do that, wouldn't it? You know, you don't look at a website like that. All right? Especially when the text is going like this. All right? But one way you can do some of that stuff is to use CSS, transitions, transforms, animations, and filters. That's what this chapter is about. We're going to run through it fairly quickly. Am I putting that on the test? If I put something like that on the test, I'll make it extra credit. All right? Now, with that said, please, if I make it like worth 20 points, don't sit there and say, I'm not going to do this stuff because I'll just do the extra credit. No, that's the extra credit isn't as important. Not only that, for those of you who still, when you go and validate your files, still have errors and warnings, heck, fix those things before Friday. All right? You should have time to do it between now and then. Well, you don't know my life, Jeff. No, I don't. But you still should be able to come up with an hour or two that you're able to do that. Then it's one less thing you've got to worry about. All right? Okay, so again, 4 topics in here. Transitions let you gradually change one or more properties of an element over time. All right? As it says, transitions let you provide CSS features using just CSS. So you're going to learn how to do them in here, but typically when you do them today, all right, you do the CSS features in concert with jQuery and regular JavaScript, one or the other, usually jQuery. All right. When we get to the jQuery stuff, people either I always equate things like this to mushrooms. All right. My middle daughter just can't stand mushrooms. She won't eat them. She swears to us she's allergic to them. Whereas my oldest daughter loves mushrooms. Well, that's how people are about jQuery. We get into it and it's like, it's kind of hard. Yeah, it is. But when you see how powerful it is, some people just fall in love with it. I can do this now? Wow. And it just, I can make an accordion like an FAQ page with like 1 line of code. I'll do that. All right. So as it says, the figure here, this shows the 5 different properties that you can work with. All right. So you transition. What property do you want to transition? How long do you want to transition for? How do you want that transition to appear on screen? And you want it to delay before the transition starts. And if you say, I don't know what that means, I think you do. As an example, what if, and this is maybe a crummy example, but it's the one that came to mind. If you think about the picture that Tom has now on his home page, the one that you were asked to change, kind of him out in the garden or wherever the heck it is, you could have it where when the site comes up, that picture isn't there, but it gradually fades into view. That's a transition. All right, that's one way that you can do a transition. I'm not saying we should do that or shouldn't do that, but you know, when you think about it, if you are writing a website that somebody's going to use and it's a game website or something like that, you might have a lot of this stuff in there. All right, where with a lot of sites, it wouldn't make sense to do that. All right, so here's an example. A transition that occurs when the mouse hovers over a heading. So you put your mouse over it and it turns to this. All right. And when you work with this stuff, like I said, there's a lot to it because what do you want to have transition? How long? How do you want it to go? And what kind of delay do you want to have? All right. So a lot of times there's a lot of thought that goes into this. As it says, the idea is it provides a smooth change from one property to another. So sometimes the way that it's used, maybe when a person is out on a website, you may ask them a question, whatever it is. You may get some feedback from them, and you may change the appearance of the website or something in the website based on the answer that they give you. But if you do that, you want it to transition smoothly. You don't want it to go like that. Or the color of your screen changes or whatever. It's usually nice when there's a little delay and they can see what happened. All right? So they give an example here of creating an accordion. Do you all know what an accordion is? And I don't mean something that gets played at weddings. All right? But it's typically it's equated most often with a frequently asked questions or an FAQ page, something like this, where you come in here, you've got these bars, you click on this one and boom, it shows you this. All right, you click on this one and that one goes back up and then you get text down here, etc. Literally, when we start working with jQuery, to do this, it's one line of code. You tell it, implement the accordion. Now you still have to write this code here and here, but actually doing it is just a line. All right? And it's doing virtually the same kind of thing that you have right here. But when you do it, you set it up and you tell it the height and what you want visible and what you want invisible, etc. All right. All right, then you've got transforms. Notice what it says. Transforms let you rotate, scale, skew, and position HTML elements. So sometimes, again, for effect, you may want to take things, notice how it's turned around type of thing, or you might want to tilt something or whatever. All right. Now like I said, there's different ways. I will tell you right now, one of the things you're going to be asked to do on the next test is if you had those pictures of Tom and the dogs that were on the testimonials page, I want them fixed. All right. So this is one way you can do it. There's other ways you can do it as well. And if you say, well, how should I do it? Look it up. All right. I think everyone in here is smart enough to be able to do that. Yes.
Are you going to give us all the text back on the next test?
I'm going to give you this one back today if everybody finishes with it.
Okay.
All right. Now they give you this gallery of transforms, and they start to show you this. Again, probably for a guy who's making a living now, pet sitting and pet walking, most of this stuff probably wouldn't make a lot of sense. All right. If you've got some kind of a slick website that you're trying to create that's got a lot of images in it, you might want things to appear, disappear, twirl around, etc. This probably isn't the site for that. All right. But this is how you do it. And they give you, again, the HTML, and they tell you how to do the transforms. You have all this code. All right. If you don't, for whatever reason, just go out to Muroc.com and you can download it. All right. And if you still have problems, let me know and I'll get it for you. All right. Animations. Again, many of the animations that you do in here with just CSS, they're real simple. In other words, in this case, you're having it slide from one end of the screen to the other end, and you're changing the color while it's sliding. All right, again, is that big a thing? No. But animation typically implies some kind of movement. That makes sense? All right. And it's usually not a whole heck of a lot of CSS that you have to write. I'm not going to make you do any animation on your test. They talk about keyframes in here and how you can use it. All right. Some of this, again, if you are creating an animation that is at least somewhat complex, can involve quite a bit of code. All right. Then finally, filters. What I like what they do here is they give you an example where they apply. They've got a picture, and they apply every single filter. There's 10 of them to this picture. So you can see, for example, with opacity, brightness, making things lighter, making things darker, etc. I'm not going to go through them. see them yourselves. All right? And that is it for that chapter. Are there any questions on, like I said, on your next test, the one that you take Friday, from chapter 12, what are you going to have to do? Well, you may rip that form apart and recreate it. I don't know, all right? Because that's one of the reasons I've got to call into him, because I want to find out exactly what he wants. And I know, knowing Tom, no, it's just fine the way it is. No, it's not. Because I know there's things that he wants that are not in there. Or there are things that are in there that he doesn't need, or both. All right? But I will ask him. So that's from chapter 11. It was all on forms. For chapter 12, I am going to ask him, even if he uses his phone, all right, to try to do a couple videos. One audio only, and one audio and video. I'm going to ask him to do that. I'm hoping that he does that. All right? And if he does, I'm going to give you both those files, and I'm going to ask that you put them into the website, where I don't know yet. It depends on what he sends me. Okay? That's it for there. So there's not a lot. So what I am going to ask, and again, the Google fonts from chapter 13, or I'm sorry, chapter 15, and from chapter 16, probably nothing with the transitions. You can put that in, but if I ask you for that, it'll be extra credit. But we're getting to the home stretch for this part of the class. So part of what you're going to be graded on in here, I'm going to ask him, what colors do you want? Those are the colors you're going to be expected to use. Even if you're like, well, I don't like those. I don't care. He's the client. Doesn't matter what you like. Doesn't matter what I like. All right? But that's what you're going to be expected to do. Anything, and Chris asked a fair question. I'll try to go and find your last two tests. I've got this one here, but I'll give them back. And anything that's in there that should be fixed, I'm going to take for granted you're going to fix. Some of you may finish this next test in an hour. Well, then you got plenty of time to look at it, to try to implement the extra credit, etc. All right? Any questions on any of that? All right. And let me do this. Okay, so I just sent them to the printer in the wrong room. Okay. So I don't have to waste paper. I'm going to walk over.